All right, so we are live. How are you all doing? It's been a rough day for me as far as how I feel. I woke up with a pounding headache. I felt nauseous all day. We had a super crazy weekend and I'm just chalking it up to that. So, this might be a little bit shorter. I'm pretty much going to go through my outline and try to leave it at that. And because I have to get groceries after this, and I'm going to try to get home and get to bed early tonight because this was our first day back in school. But we got through school. I got my lesson plans done for the week, ready to go for the week now. I feel prepared for that. So that is good, but I feel like I've been muddling through the day. So hopefully you all had a better Monday by the way you feel than I did. So just this week, I did a post to my Gently Led Sisters group about this upcoming subject. And to my surprise, it hit a nerve with some women. It basically confirmed my suspicions when it came to this subject. So I am going to delve into it. I am titling this GLS Women Professing to be Godly, Picking and Choosing What They Believe in the Bible. I'm just going to come out and say it. When it comes to the subject of having children, many women are making this into an idol, the subject of having as many children as you can. There are quiverful families out there that are promoting leaving your womb in the hands of God and never using anything that could prevent having any more children. I'm going to state my convictions right now when it comes to this subject. First and foremost, I'm going to let you know where I stand as the owner of this channel, as the one who decides the content that goes into the channel, as the one who decides the subjects that are going to be talked about. I believe that children are a blessing from God. And as such, we should not allow selfish reasons to get into the way of having them. Things like really nice vacations, having nice things, having more money. Um, we have always been on the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to riches in this world. We don't have a lot of riches, my husband and I. Part of the reason is because we have so many children, and that is a choice that we made. We decided early on we wanted a lot of children. And because of that, any extra resources we have been poured into raising our family, housing them, feeding them, providing for them, as we do believe it is our job as the parents to be the sole providers of all of these needs. That's why we have tried to stay off government assistance when it came to things like food. Um, we try to forego any of the government programs as far as education, welfare, different things like that. So we have taken this responsibility very seriously. Hello, Ashley. Hello, Sarah. And hello, Value of the One. I've never seen you in the chat before, so welcome. So I believe that if you go into marriage just wanting it all as far as vacations and fancy homes and yachts and you decide, I don't want kids because of that, I would deem that as a selfish reason. I do believe that children are a blessing from God. If this was not the case, I would not have had 11 positive pregnancy tests in my marriage, and we have 8 living children, and we have a lot of kids, I guess, by the world standards. To me, it really doesn't feel like that many most of the time. Sometimes it does. To me, it doesn't really feel like that many, but according to the world standards, we have a lot of kids. I believe, number 2, God designed our bodies in such a way that we aren't clueless what's going on, and you can really only get pregnant about 7 days out of the month. Sometimes there are exceptions, and I've had those exceptions, like, when you're in the 2% chance, and to me, that just shows me that God really wanted that child to be here. So, yes, I do believe, though, that God designed our bodies in such a way that we are not clueless as to what's going on. There's very clear-cut cycles to a woman and the things she goes through monthly. There are basically 4 weeks out of the month, and only one of those weeks you're really very fertile. So I don't think he did that. He did that by design. He did that so we would know what's going on. And this art is not being taught to our daughters. So before my daughters get married, and even now as they're starting to go through this phase in their life, when they come into puberty, I kind of explain the basic cycles. This is what's happening this week. This is what's happening this week. This is what's happening this week. I want them to know what's going on. Number 3, hormonal birth control from a Christian standpoint is wrong. And it is murder. I do believe it. It has the, I'm not going to say it's murder. I'm going to say it has the potential to be murder because we don't know how many fertilized eggs are really making it. We don't know how many the body is aborting because of the hormonal birth control. So I'm not going to make a blanket statement and say it is murder because some women have the potential to not ovulate on hormonal birth control, completely shuts that part of their body down. However, some women do have what's called breakthrough ovulation. And then when that happens, their body does release an egg. It is fertilized, but then the different mechanisms in the birth control will either irritate the lining of the uterus. I know another mechanism is to make cervical mucus thicker so that sperm can't swim through. I'm being very open in this. So if there's little children around, this is definitely a woman's subject today, just a little warning. But it will also make cervical mucus thicker to prohibit the sperm from reaching the egg. But oftentimes that does not work. And so then the third mechanism of the birth control pill is that it will alter the lining of the uterus so it is hostile to a fertilized egg. In that case, the fertilized egg would make it all the way to the lining of the uterus and would not be able to implant. And then the body would just flush it out with the period. So I do believe that life starts at fertilization. And from the time that that little egg is fertilized with the sperm and it becomes a human, becomes a living soul, a living being at that point. So from my standpoint, from a Christian standpoint, when we truly believe in life, um, hormonal birth control then would be wrong if it has the potential to abort a fertilized egg. Number 4, in no way is preventing. And when I say preventing, using non-hormonal things, okay? So barrier methods, I'm not going to spell those out. Tracking your cycle and abstaining different during the very, very fertile time or using barrier methods. I'm going to leave it at that. In no way is preventing naturally, okay, a murder mindset or akin to abortion. This was a comment that was made on the post that I did. And to be fair, she came back the next day and apologized for making it because she had talked to her husband about it. So I will give her that. But she was quoting Carissa Collins, and you can look this up. Carissa Collins is a big time influencer who is an open womb influencer. And I'm going to get into influencers and preachers in a minute, but she literally wrote that when you prevent, you have the murder mindset, and it's akin to abortion because you are preventing souls that are crying out to be born from being born, basically. Now, I want to say, hey, Julia, I want to say that that is a Mormon teaching. If you look it up, and I posted a picture of what it says, Mormons believe in spirit children or something along those lines, how all these, that before we inhabit human bodies, we're like these spirit children in heaven, like waiting to be put into a human body. Can I say that life is created by God? And at the moment when sperm meets that egg and it is fertilized, that is when it becomes a human being. That's when it becomes a soul. There's not all these drifting souls in heaven waiting to be put into bodies. That is a weird teaching. It's an LDS teaching. I believe Catholics believe something similar. As Baptists, we reject that. Okay. Life begins at conception. God creates life. That's when it happens. So if you have this mindset, we might as well go as far to say, then I'm using logic here, okay? I'm using logic. I'm not using emotions. I'm using logic. If you have the mindset that preventing 7 days out of the month, if you try to prevent by using some form that's not going to abort the fertilized egg, that's a murder mindset, okay? Then we're going to have to also establish now how often you have to be intimate with your husband. Because if you skip just one day, you have the murder mindset because that day could have been the day that the soul in heaven entered into the mortal human body or whatever. That could have been the day where life was conceived. So now you need to do it every single day. You need to make sure, because if you don't, you have the murder mindset. Now, not only that, what about twice a day? You know, and if you don't, you're in sin because you have the murder mindset. That's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous mindset. It in no way, prevention in no way is akin to abortion. And I reject that teaching. Carissa Collins is extremely over the top when it comes to this subject. She will not talk to people about this. She has her mind made up. No one can tell her anything. No one can convince her of anything. She is right. Everyone else is wrong. And I am also appalled at how she basically does these reels every day with all of her kids. And to me, she's very much doing what the Duggars did, where they kind of what's the word? Ladies, help me out. When you are like promoting your kids and like just putting them out there for the world to see, basically using your kids to garner a following and publicizing your children, different things like that. Her children are very young. They don't have a choice in this matter. So they can't, I think her oldest is maybe entering teenage years, which I'm kind of surprised she doesn't have a problem with it yet. But um, she's basically publicizing her children to promote this this belief that you should never take matters into your own hands, open womb, quiverful mindset. So um that's what she does. I don't agree with her methods, and I don't agree with her tone, and I don't agree with how she um just calls things sin that are not sin, and how she will go as far to say that if you are preventing in any way, that you have a murder mindset. I think that's completely flawed. I think that's horrendous to accuse other women of that, especially women who have been through, I mean, horrendous pregnancies, horrendous deliveries, maybe have had 4 or 5 C-sections, and they're facing the possibility of their uterus, rupturing. They're facing possibilities of hemorrhage. They're facing possibilities of stillbirth if they have genetic abnormalities. Them and their husband genetically are producing, children that have that chance. There are couples out there like that. Every situation is unique and every situation is different. Is basically what I'm trying to get at. And it's not Carissa's right to determine what every family on the planet does. And that's where I have the real problem. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. But both husband and I also believe that both husband and wife need to be on board when it comes to this subject. And this is the thing that got me um, kind of thinking about this, because I'm in another group and an anonymous poster. And now, if this would have been someone that had used their name, I probably would not have like really drawn that much attention to it. But as one of me and my friends were talking about, when people do things anonymously, especially in other groups, um, they're almost like Dear Ann letters or Dear Laura letters, where, someone writes into a news column, they never use their name and they're just wondering a question. So this could be any woman. I don't know who it is. I saw a lot of problems in this post that she had done. And she was very vague. But in the post, she said, ladies, please pray for me. In my prayers, and I'm paraphrasing, this is not exact. In my prayers, God showed me that I am supposed to give up this area of control in my life when it comes to having children. We have 3. I couldn't remember if it was 3 or 4. We have 3 or 4. My husband says that he's done. That's enough for him. But God has told me that no, it's not. And so I told my husband, and my husband basically told me, no, that's not what God is telling you, because I'm done. I don't want anymore. So they went 3 months with no intimacy. In those 3 months, he resorted to using pornography. And she said, now we are back to having intimacy, but it's only this one form of intimacy. And I'm not going to state it here. And she said, because he's so afraid of getting me pregnant, she said, what can I do? You know, can you please pray that God will change his heart or God will change my heart? Well, I had a lot of issues with this, okay? Because here's a woman who's professing to be godly. She's saying, God told me this in my prayers. God told me this in my Bible study. But yet she's not doing the most simple thing that God tells us as wives to do. Her husband has told her no. Her husband has said, I'm not on board with this. I feel, like we've had enough kids or whatever. And she is in complete rebellion. And I'm assuming she didn't want him to use any type of barrier method if she said If they went 3 months, she didn't really specify. So maybe he just didn't want to. I don't know. I don't know the specifics. She didn't give the specifics, but reading between the lines and the vagueness of it, I came to the conclusion that she had said, we're not doing anything to prevent, God told me this, so thus we are doing it. And ladies, we cannot make things into idols so much so that we are willing to usurp our husband's wishes and desires to get those things. And when it comes to this area of having children, I am a firm believer in that both spouses need to be on board. Um, if a husband truly loves his wife, he's going to look out for her desires. And if a wife truly loves her husband, she's going to want to do what he wants. Okay. So why is this going on in some communities, whether that's a homeschool community, quiverful community, whatever it is? Why is this going on? I think number one, it's because a woman is following an open womb preacher or an open womb influencer. Okay. And I want to just say right now, I blame the influencer movements for getting it into women's heads that the ultimate test and show of spirituality is how many kids you have. While I love kids, I also know that some women or men cannot handle a ton of kids financially or mentally, and that's just the truth of it. I have long since held the stance while welcoming more children into my own home and life. But for every pregnancy, my husband has been completely on board and ready for the extra responsibility. I would never go against him or behind his back and try to have a surprise pregnancy if he wasn't ready. There are some men that simply don't want or can't provide for a ton of children. And I'm going to say right now, ladies, know what your husband wants before you marry him. Men, know what your wife wants before you marry her. This needs to be talked about. How many kids do you want? Can you handle a big family? Do you want a big family? Are we going to have the open womb mentality? Are we going to use natural family planning? What do you feel about this? What do you feel about hormonal birth control? Have these discussions before marriage. Okay, don't think that you can change him after you get married because chances are you can't. And when you start having kids and you realize the responsibility of raising those children in the admonition of the Lord, loving those children, providing for those children, you're going to see it's a huge undertaking, huge, and one not to be taken lightly. Our goal as moms and wives are not to pop out as many kids as we have. We have to raise those children. We have to produce functioning members of society. We need to raise children who love the Lord. We need to raise children who love us. We need to raise children who are going to continue on in this life. And that is a huge undertaking, a huge undertaking. So, all that being said, there are some men that simply don't want or can't provide for more children. If it's financial, I would recommend learning new skills so that they can provide for more if it's their conviction. But the Bible also talks about how important it is to provide for the children you have. And if you can't, you're worse than an infidel. I get very fired up about this subject if you can't tell. Those are Bible words, not mine. So why do women think it's okay to say they're Bible believers, yet then go against clear Bible commands, such as listening to our husbands when it comes to the subject? Oh, I don't know why. Women make this into an idol. They really do. And I truly believe a huge part is the influencer movements. Carissa Collins has a huge following on Instagram, a huge following. But she is not over your family. There are YouTube preachers that have a huge following when it comes to this subject of having as many kids as your body will allow you to have, as God will give you. But they're not the ones financially providing for your family. They're not the ones raising your family. They're not the ones that are going to stand in front of God one day and give an account for how they did with your family. You alone are the one that's going to stand before God. You are the one alone your husband is the one that's going to be the one providing for those children. So he needs to be on board. So what else have I seen in some of these communities? They say God's convicted them of leaving everything in his hands. So that's usually the second step. Number one, a woman follows an open womb preacher or an influencer such as Carissa Collins. They say God's convicted them of leaving everything in his hands. They decide they're no longer going to track their cycle or use barrier methods. And number four, Their husband's not on board. The woman has been shown all of this. Okay, the husband's not on board. Things to remember about our husbands deciding to have more children. They are the providers, not the pastor or the influencer. A child is more than a baby. Babies are fun. Babies are wonderful. I love babies. Ask the woman at our church. I love babies so much. I wish, I'm trying to get Penelope to love me. She just doesn't love me right now. That's my friend Nicole's baby. I'm trying. She's adorable. Oh, Ezra. Oh, love him. Alice, love her. All the babies at church. If I missed any, I'm sorry. I love them all. But a child is more than a baby. You have at least another 20 years of raising that child. I'm saying 20 years because um, my kids don't move out right when they're 18. They're usually about 20, 21, maybe 22 by the time Jason does. I don't know. So they don't move out right when they're 18. So you got at least another 2 decades of raising that child. And I'm going to say this too. Having a child is more than just getting rid of them at 18. You're always going to be a mother to that child. I don't care if my oldest, he's, what is he now? 22. He's 22, he's 32, he's 42, he's 52. I'm always going to love him. I'm always going to care for him. I'm always going to worry about him. So you have a child forever. You don't just stop being a mom at 18. You're always going to be a mom. And that is a long time investment. So it's not just, oh, I'm pregnant, I'm having a baby. You have at least another 2 decades of pouring your heart and soul into that child. You can deny your husband's demands if it's a method that's sinful, a method that will abort or murder a fertilized egg, but there are methods that just don't do that. And they're not ethically nor morally wrong. And it doesn't matter how you feel that God has told you. If you are usurping your husband's wishes and desires or going over his head, that's a sin. So, and I'm standing on that. There is nothing ethically wrong with natural family planning. I don't care what your favorite influencer says. There's nothing. The Bible is so silent on this matter. And where the Bible is silent, we should be too. We need to stop adding to God's commands. We need to stop adding to his principles. You know what one of his clear-cut commands is? That a wife needs to be listening to her husband, that a husband needs to love his wife. So all of this goes hand in hand with this subject. There are clear Bible commands about not defrauding each other. So if you've gotten it into your head that by gone it, I'm going to have as many babies as God gives me, but your husband's like, honey, I'm not on board with this. And you're like, fine, you're sleeping on the couch for the next 10 years until you see that I'm right. You're in clear rebellion. And while it is never a woman's fault when a husband has to turn to things like pornography, men do have, most men, an innate desire to be physical with their wives. They need that release. They need to be physical with their wives. And the Bible is very clear on this subject, and it talks about not defrauding each other, except it be for a time. If there's a time when either one of you need to fast or pray about it, but you both have to agree on it. You can't, as the wife, pull the rug out from underneath your husband's feet and be like, aha, I'm doing this until I get my way. I think that is one of the most ungodly things a wife could ever do to her husband. And it's just not respectful. Why would you treat him with such disrespect? Can you imagine if he did that to you? If he was like, nope, not giving you anything until I get my way. Everyone would call him a jerk, a narcissist, abusive, whatever you want to say. But then why do wives turn around and do it with their husbands? I think it's a shame. But the Bible is very, very silent when it comes to this method of preventing, and Onan is not a good case. People miss the whole Onan thing. The sin of Onan was that he was a wicked man refusing to follow the command to raise up seed. They had laws back then that we do not have nowadays. This doesn't even apply to us nowadays because we don't do this whole thing of raising up seed. He was commanded to raise up seed and he didn't want to. He completely rebelled and did his own thing, and that's why God struck him dead. You have to look at the context of the story in the Bible. Don't let someone confuse you with the story or guilt trip you with it or hold it over your head. The Bible is very, very silent about prevention, but it's clear that women of the day knew what was going on with their cycles. You look at different stories, the horrible story of Lot and his daughters, they knew exactly when they could conceive. The story of the wives in the Bible, like, bartering with mandrakes that they could lie with their husband. They knew it was that time of the month and they wanted to conceive. God did it that way on purpose. Children are blessings, and that is clear throughout the Bible. But there is also not a number put on be fruitful and multiply. If you have one child, you have multiplied. If you have two children, you have multiplied. If you have three children, you have multiplied. God did not say, you must or thou must have 10 children in order to have multiplied correctly. No, multiplication means you start out with two, you add on to that, that's going to be multiplying. Okay. So there is no number put on that in the Bible. And we, as someone not being in a household, it is not our duty nor our right to determine what that number is of multiplying for any other family but our own. It is not our job. It's not our area. Off limits, totally off limits. And it's off limits for any preacher to decide that. And it's off limits for any influencer to decide that. Off limits. Your marriage is your top priority. And staying in your lane and looking over your family and doing your own thing. If one thing this show promotes, okay, here's some things that's worked for us. Here's some things that's worked for my family, but it's also your family is different than mine, and my family is different than yours, and your husband's different than mine, and my husband's different than yours. And here's some basic principles. Like, the Bible does say this, so I'm going to teach and promote this. The Bible does say not to do this, so let's not do that. Clear-cut things in the Bible, but where the Bible is silent, we need to be silent. And if your husband wants to put that on pause, whether that's for your health that's falling apart, whether that's for your uterus that's about to rupture. When you breastfeed, you are not guaranteed to not have a cycle. You are not guaranteed that. With almost every child, even the ones I co-slept with, I started within 6 months of having the baby. So some women, they could not use a pacifier. They could, nurse on demand. They could nurse not covered. They could co-sleep, and their body is still they're very fertile. They're just going to kick it into high gear. It doesn't matter. Some women are more fertile after they've had a baby. So, the whole nursing thing, that doesn't even apply to a lot of women. And so maybe, you've been told, listen, you're overworked right now. Your body is under a lot of stress. You just kind of need a break. I think God designed our bodies in a way that we would know what was going on. And you're not sinning if you're listening to your husband and heeding his counsel when it comes to this, no matter what Carissa Collins or no matter what any other famous preacher promotes. Okay. At the end of the day, you have to do what's right for your family. The number of kids is just one area that women usurp their husband's authority in. I'm going to go over some more in a minute, but I was also asked, what if your husband is pressuring you to have more and you just don't feel you can for health reasons, or you're overwhelmed, or you have severe postpartum? And this one is tough because in all of my years of counseling, I've not seen it too often where the husband is pressuring his wife for more and she just feels she can't. Oftentimes, I feel like it's the woman pressuring the man, and he's going, whoa, 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 let's put the brakes on for a little bit. And she's like, no, we're having, as many as I can. We're having as many. God told me this. It's always the woman trying to be the more spiritual one, trying to put on the head covering when her husband doesn't want her to, saying that God told her this. Women tend to be the more over the top spiritually than men. I've just found that in all my years of ministry. So, I would just say, at the risk of acting like I'm preaching, because I know this channel is not directed at men. Men, love your wives. This is an area where you need to love your wives. And you're going to know if your wife is constantly crying and she has postpartum depression and anxiety, and she just feels like the world is a dark, dark place and she just can't get out of the pit. And, you love your wives, respect that she's in a dark place and try to get her help, whether that's getting her therapy or counseling, or helping her alleviate her burden, helping with the children, taking the crying kid, walking the halls at 3 a.m. with the colicky baby, whatever that is. Men, love your wives. And this is one area. My husband was called effeminate by another preacher for believing that wives should have a say when it comes to this, because they're going to be the ones having the baby. They're going to be the ones bearing the child. They're going to be the ones, and he told men, listen to your wives, get her say on this. Don't just take what you want and thump your chest and say you're the man in charge. Part of leading is gently leading, knowing what your wife is capable of, knowing what she can handle mentally, physically. It's a lot of work bearing a child and raising that child. It is so much work. The hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Wives, ask for more help if you need to. Tell them your struggles. Don't remain alone. Let them know I'm struggling. This is hard on me. Ask your husband if you can have some time to heal. I have been through some extremely traumatic births. Abigail was one of my most traumatic. She was number 3, and she was breech, and she was born vaginally, and I had to be cut pretty good with her. And because of that, it was very traumatic on me. It was a long healing process. And even now, almost 20 years later, I still have some scar tissue that I deal with where I have to be a little careful. Um, Having children will affect our bodies for the rest of our lives. And our husbands need to take that into account, because most likely we'll never be the same after having children. And if a husband is loving, he's going to recognize that. And he's gonna know that you need time to heal, and he's gonna know that he needs to be gentle with you and easy on you. And I can't say enough about that. You know, I've almost never seen this happen. Most men respect their wives' wishes when it comes to this, unless they're just an extremely selfish man. I don't see the need with most men to just have a ton of kids, because I feel, especially if a man allows his wife to be a stay-at-home mom, he recognizes the responsibility that's going into it. And so he's very cautious about, he's always excited. My husband's always been excited, but then too, it's almost like there's the realization of another mouth to feed and all the responsibility, another 20 years of raising that child. And so I've almost never seen it happen for some women. And I think it's because of influencers like Carissa Collins. I'm going to keep saying that, but she's good at what she does. She's very, I guess that's why she's an influencer who has such a large following. She's very charismatic, and she makes these cute little reels with cute little kids. And she's persuasive. But because I'm someone who's always just known what I believed and I'm secure in what I believe, it has no effect on me because I can kind of see through it. And I've known stories of women who have adopted this mindset even when their husband wasn't on board. And when you're not ready, or when your husband's not ready, there's a sense of resentment there for each new child that's added onto the family. And a lot of women think, or a lot of men think, if we just have another kid, this is gonna fix our problems. This is gonna fix our marriage problems. Like, this will bring, it's a whole new chapter. But with every new child comes more responsibility. And with every new addition, that's just more stress. Let's just be honest. And so children are the biggest blessing in the world, but they're also the biggest stress in the world. I've often asked my husband, what do couples fight about that don't have kids? Like, what do they even fight about? They probably have more money, so there's less financial stress when you don't have any kids. They probably are able to go on dates together all the time. So, they're still like actively getting to know each other and falling in love. So, like, what do people fight about when there's no kids? You know, I don't understand it. So, yes, Amanda, I agree. She's very manipulative. And yes, and I'm sorry about that, Marissa. I didn't even see that comment before I talked about, yes, there's a sense of yeah. Anyways, I'm going to move on. So, yes, physical violence in a relationship. I wanted to put this out there because I I'm one of the biggest advocates that I've seen in the Baptist world when it comes to having zero tolerance for any type of physical abuse or physical violence. Um, I believe that a man hitting his wife has no place in the home and should never be tolerated. And if you are in that situation where you are being hit, I urge you to get help, especially if there are children in the home. I urge you to get someplace safe because when you bring a child into a world, you as the mom are now the biggest advocate for that child, and you are the safest person for that child, and you are the one that's supposed to keep that child the safest out of anyone in the entire world. That is your job now. If you are in a home where you are being physically abused, chances are that child will eventually be physically abused. So it is your job and your right to seek help if that is happening to you. And I plead with you, I implore with you, please get help if you are ever in that situation where there's physical violence happening. So, that physical violence is a reason to always get help or leave, to look into legal separation, to do what you need to do to keep you and your children protected. So I throw that in there too because a lot of quiverful families, I have found like I said, I've been doing deep dives, especially into religious homes where there is abuse. And oftentimes the husband is abusive towards his wife, which then gets transferred down to the kids, unfortunately. And it's a sense of having authority and a sense of being in control of things. And oftentimes in quiverful families, there is such this thirst for power and control that there is physical violence in the home. And I do think this stems from insecurity from the dad's part of not really being a true leader, thinking that leading is by forceful leading, such as hitting or whatever. And that's not even true leadership. You don't hold a gun to someone's head and say, follow me, or else this is going to happen. You don't hit your wife and say, obey me, or this will be the result if you don't obey me. A true leader knows how to lead through example, and a wife will want to lead him. My husband has never raised a hand to me, never raised a fist to me, and he's never had to shout at me and say, woman, you better submit. We're doing this. In the first years, it was more tough to follow his lead because I didn't know him as well as I do now, 2 decades later, right? But over the last 2 decades, he has proven himself to be a wonderful husband, a wonderful dad, and someone who I would follow to the ends of the earth. And I don't care where he went. I don't care even if he moved to Florida where the roaches are as big as mice. I would follow him if that's what he wanted. So I would follow him wherever he led me. And it's because he's proven himself to be a trustworthy man, not through shaking his fist at me or through raising his hand to me, but by following God and being a loving husband and a loving dad. That's how you lead by example. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. So yes, Amanda, I have been called a feminist for that, but I stand on that and I always have. Even when it comes to the subject of natural family planning, when I was explaining my thoughts one time to someone that was more of the open womb, quiverful movement, she looked at me and she told me, I believe you are in sin for doing this or believing this way. And I said, okay, you can think that. It takes a lot to offend me, um, because I don't want to live in an echo chamber. I like having discussions with people who don't agree with me. And I'm not going to get all bent out of shape if someone has different beliefs than me, even in this area. So I think it's funny though, because I would not say someone that's quiverful is in sin unless they're going against their husband's desires or wishes. And then I might say that's a sin. But I wouldn't say that that's a sin to believe that, your womb belongs to God and you're just going to let him decide how many kids you have. I'm not going to say that's a sin. So I think it's pretty cheeky to say that I'm in sin by simply, following my husband's lead in this area. So just going to put that out there. Um, but the same woman has since gone on to have a divorce. She's divorced and her life's kind of a mess right now. And it's sad because it's usually the over the top extreme people that have no balance in their lives. They really don't know what they believe, or they have this belief because of a man that they're following. And when I say man, that includes women too, like Carissa Collins. They have this belief of who, because of who they're following. It's not a true heart belief, because if it was, then, they wouldn't be getting divorced. They wouldn't be having affairs. They wouldn't be doing whatever, other thing that they're doing. So you have to be careful about that. Okay, so disclaimer when it comes to this physical violence thing, against physical violence of all sorts. I think people know that about me. Legal separation and get the courts involved if you are being abused. The government's job is to punish evildoers. And if your husband is physically assaulting you, he is an evildoer, full stop. End of sentence. All right. It's not biblical for a husband to hit his wife, and it's not biblical for physical violence to be going on in the home. Your children are a priority if your husband is being physically abusive. And so I just wanted to put that disclaimer in there, just in case anyone wondered where I stood on that. So what are some area wives who profess to be godly, bold-faced, choosing to do their own thing? And there's other different areas, even apart from having children. This one just really stood out to me because I've known so many situations in the past where this has happened. They read the Quiverful movement books, they follow Carissa Collins, they listen to some preaching on YouTube, and they feel really guilty over, going along with what their husband wants. And as long, as like I've said before, as long as it's not a hormonal something or other that's going to abort a fertilized egg, something that's not morally wrong or sinful, they still feel very guilty about it. And so then they just decide we're having as many children as God wants us to have. That starts a lot of the resentment in the home, because then their husband doesn't want to be intimate with them. And then men do need release. So he starts sinning, and it's all on him. He shouldn't be this way, but he starts sinning in other areas such as pornography, or even, affairs or something, just to find that release. And the whole home falls apart. And then you've got a divorce situation on their hands. And then you've got a broken home. Then you've got the mom being a single mom, not able to even homeschool anymore. Guys, I've seen it. I've seen it happen. And it all comes down to this pet thing of having as many children as you can. And it's often instigated by influencers. And that's my belief on it. So what are some other areas? Well, we already went over the children one. How about money? We decide to do our own thing with money. He's the sole provider, and we get to stay at home. It's a huge blessing to be able to stay at home and raise your kids. And he is the sole provider, but we go crazy spending the money. We rack up the credit card debt. We buy things that we don't really need. We're extravagant with it. We're so extravagant, there's no money left to pay the bills or no money left to pay the groceries. So as women, we need to be careful about saying that we're godly women or claiming to be godly, but then going over our husband's head when it comes to this too. How about where you live? Some women fight their husbands tooth and nail on, maybe their husband gets a job transfer to another state, and they just nag and nag and nag him because, let's say, heaven forbid, it's Illinois. Oh no, Illinois seems to be the state everyone hates lately. And they just nag and nag and nag him. And he's just like, fine, we won't take it. We'll stay here. And then she's completely going against his desires and what he wants. Maybe it would be better overall, for their family, financially, whatever. You got to be really careful with that, because I truly believe that you can make a home and make a life whatever state you live in. All states are pretty much equal. And all states have their perks and all states have their downsides. So you got to be really careful with nagging your husbands to death about that. What about physical affection? So we decide that, we turn down our husband with every advance and we're not there for him readily. Well, this goes both ways. Obviously, if you're in a nice, close, respectful relationship, a loving relationship, he's going to realize if you're overworked and overstressed and tired, and he's not going to push it. But you, as the wife, you need to try to be there for your husband. You need to be readily available. I don't think enough older women are teaching this to the younger women, But you alone are supposed to be the one fulfilling your husband's physical needs. As such, you need to take it pretty seriously. You need to be readily available for him. You need to stop turning him down every chance you get. You need to look forward to that time of day. You need to spruce yourself up and be happy and willing and eager. I guess I'll say that. um, you are supposed to render due benevolence to each other. And as husbands, you are going to understand when your wife goes through seasons where you need to exhibit self-control. And I do believe that when you're in the dating relationship, you should be able to, as a man, to exhibit self-control during that time. And it's a good indicator to your wife or your wife to be that you're going to be able to control your vessel even after you're married. After childbirth, there's going to be a couple months almost where you're not able to be physically affectionate, and you have to be okay with that because your wife needs time to heal, and you have to be sensitive to her needs, to her physical needs. After some babies, it's going to be harder than others. Like I said, I've had a couple very traumatic births where it took quite a long time to recover from physically. I've had other births where I walked out of the hospital feeling like I hadn't even given birth. It was so easy. Yeah, it was pretty easy. I've had a couple that were pretty easy physically, but then emotionally they weren't. Like Hannah was my easiest physically. Barely felt like I had a baby a day after I had her, but emotionally she was my hardest. So I think because it was so quick, emotionally my body didn't have time to like catch up. So Hannah was one of my hardest emotionally. And a husband should be sensitive to that, you know. Um, Chanello, I know, but you've never come across to me as like hating Pennsylvania. You know, you've made a nice life there for you and your family. And you don't like complain about it to me too much. I know you say you're always cold, but that's like the most you do when it comes to that, I guess. That's so funny. Yeah. I've heard that if you can acclimate to the cold, you can acclimate to anything. You can acclimate to heat, you can acclimate to everything. So I just feel like I'm acclimated to all weather because in Illinois it can get pretty cold in the winters. So um yeah. But anyways, yes, back to physical affection, you are to render due benevolence. And a lot of wives think that they know better than God when it comes to this area. And they think that they're perfectly within their rights to just completely turn their husband down all the time. I think both should be sensitive to the other when it comes to this area. What about raising kids? As the mom, you are with the kids 75% of the time. If your husband doesn't want something going on in the home, don't let it go on in the home. If your husband doesn't want a show being watched, don't watch it. If your husband doesn't want your daughters wearing pants, don't go over his head. And when he's gone, let them wear pants. If he doesn't want whatever it is, any type of standard in the home, whether that's your girls wearing makeup or no makeup, whether that's them having piercings or no piercings, dyeing their hair or not dyeing their hair, whatever it is, just you need to back up your husband. You know, you need to back up your husband. My husband and I were married at 20 and we wanted kids right away. We also said we wanted 10 kids. So we both knew we wanted a big family. We have gone on to have 11 positive tests and 8 full-term pregnancies and kids here on the earth. At no time in our marriage have I ever told him God convicted me of something and he must listen to me. My husband must listen to me. We've always been on the same page when it came to hormonal birth control. I didn't want to use it and I explained it to him. He had no clue about any of that until I showed him like what some of the inserts said. And then he was fully on board with me. You know, natural family planning. I've had chronic illnesses that needed to be treated, or I was very sick and I needed some time for my body to heal, or I had traumatic births and I needed a long time. I would say after Abby, she was probably one of my most traumatic. It was a good year before physically I felt okay after Abby. With Lana, she was extremely traumatic. She was one of my first posterior babies. And she was one of my worst. It was really bad. Went through 2 or 3 hours of trying to get her out, no pain meds, nothing. Ended up having to be cut at the very end because she was so stuck. And I was in a very, very bad place when it came to thinking about having more children for a while. And then after her, also, I got treated for a chronic illness. Um, the FDA released a new medicine, and I was approved for like this lottery thing, basically a guinea pig. Needless to say, the chances of conceiving while on it, it was almost 100% chance it would be stillborn. It was very, very high risk warnings for not getting pregnant while on this medicine. So, I took that seriously. And I went on to have that chronic illness cured. And so that's one of the reasons that she's our big gap. But my husband was on board for all of it. And we both reached a decision where we knew this had to be done, especially since I wasn't quite done with children. I wanted to have more if God blessed us. And so if I got this chronic illness treated, that I knew I would not be able to pass it on to any more children because I had passed it on to my oldest son and he went on to have the medicine and it's gone from him too. But because of health reasons, we had to do that. And so it did treat my chronic illness. It did get rid of it. And then I didn't even have to worry about that with Kelly and Hannah, which was really, really nice. Because with the other kids, we had to like get them tested, make sure they didn't have it, different things like that. So we've always been on the same page. We've been on the same page regarding what we allow in our home, how our money was spent. Literally every single thing, we have been on the same page. And even when it came to things that I don't necessarily agree with, do you know there are some things or some standards that my husband has that I don't necessarily agree with or see eye to eye? But you know what? Because I believe the Bible and because I profess to be godly, I'm going to follow his lead without complaint. And I'm going to go along with that. And oftentimes my kids will run something by me. Can I do this? And I'll tell them, your dad wouldn't like that. And it doesn't have to be your dad doesn't like it. I don't agree, but your dad, like, I'm not trying to pit them against him. No, my kids know dad has the final say. Like, dad's the authority in the home. So even if it's something where I'm like, it's not a big deal to me, if I know it's a big deal to him, I'm not going to allow it. It's not going to go on in our home. So oftentimes I'll tell them, your dad wouldn't like that. No, dad wouldn't like that. No. And it goes the other way too. We both respect each other's. Sometimes my kids will ask him something and he'll be like, your mom wouldn't like that. So it's not that I'm the authority, it's that he loves me and we're on the same page when it comes to raising our kids. And we want them to see us as a team. We don't want them to see us at odds against each other or us pitting the kids against one parent or whatever. We're on the same team. We're working towards the same goal. I respect his wishes. He'll respect or defer to mine sometimes. So, we're a working unit, and that's what marriage should be. Our convictions have not changed in this subject. And it doesn't matter who we hung around. It doesn't matter what group we've been with. It doesn't matter what influence I listened to or what preacher preached what. This subject is one that every home must decide, and no one can decide it for you. A pastor or influencer will not be raising your children. They will not be providing for your children. Their authority ends where your home begins. You have to be the one who decides what is good and acceptable in your home. You have to be the one who decides what your convictions are. You have to be the one who decides what your standards are. I am shocked and appalled daily at people who have no moral compass. They have no clue how to raise kids. They have no clue about anything when it comes to establishing a good foundation for the home. And they're just blindly following an infallible man or an infallible influencer. And when that influencer changes, so do they. When that preacher drops the standards, so do they. They have no idea. My husband and I have had the same standards since we started having kids, and we're going to continue to have the same standards. And it doesn't matter who says what, who does what. And at the end of the day, you have to judge the fruit too. If someone has good, godly fruit, and I mean the way that their kids are turning out, the way their home is run, their ministry, whatever it is, they have good godly fruit. Go ahead and take their advice. But at the end of the day, they're not in charge of your home. They don't stand before God for the decisions that were done in your home. And at the end of the day, if you follow someone's advice and it's horrible advice, if you follow my advice and it's horrible advice and your family falls apart, you alone stand before God and you're judged for that. So just keep that in mind when you listen to anyone. Take anything any man or woman says with a grain of salt. We're not God. We didn't write the Bible. We don't know all the answers. I've claimed many times I don't know all the answers. I can only tell you what's helped in my life and what hasn't. If you like the fruit of my family, then take some of my advice. If you don't like the fruit of my family, then take someone else's advice. But I have followed many times. I've said before, the angel family has their children are wonderful. They all love them. They love the Lord and they're in church serving the Lord. And so I listen on the edge of my seat to anything Mrs. Angel says regarding the home and the family, because that's what I want. At the end of the day, my husband and I are just two Christians who love the Lord and are trying to raise a godly family that will follow after this lifestyle and who will love us, who will still love us even after leaving the home. They still love us. That's what we're trying to produce. So it's not your right to judge other homes when it comes in this area where no sin is involved. And when I say judge, yes, judge the fruit. You are allowed to do that, especially when taking advice from someone else. But I'm talking about it's not okay for you to sit on your high horse and say, because I have this conviction, every other home must have this conviction. Because, like I said, you are not in charge of their family. You're not the one raising their children. You have no idea of the health concerns going on. And there are some women who are under severe guilt because of this subject, because maybe they can't have children. Have you ever thought about that? What about the women that can't have children? And we're in this contest to see who's more spiritual by having as many kids as we can. And there's some women who God hasn't opened their womb and they can't have children yet. So think about how that makes them feel. It's not your right to judge other homes, sit on your high horse and say that everyone must be as me because I have declared it. If you're asked, you can give your opinion, but it's not your right to interfere in someone else's home or deem something a sin that is not a sin. And that's what I mainly want to get across with this channel and with my group too. Like, we need to be careful declaring things sins that are not sins. And I think as Baptists, we like to make lots of things into sins that possibly aren't sins. And then we become over the top with things. We go further and further with it. We become more and more extreme. And we have to be really careful. We need to have balance in our lives. Yes, Amber, I agree. um, you have a very good foundation being raised, um, being raised in the home that you have been raised in. I'm also going to say, like, if it comes to anything on this channel as far as like gossip or unfounded facts or unfounded gossip, I am going to immediately delete. This is not a gossip site or a gossip channel, and you can take that somewhere else if you um if you are so inclined to come on here and do that. I'm speaking from my own experiences, and I am speaking this subject was posted about last week in my Gently Led Sisters group. So if none of you are in my Gently Led Sisters group on Facebook, I try to keep it a safe place where women can talk about things like this without fear of repercussion. Because one thing that I've done in my group too, I don't want it to be an echo chamber. So I welcome like graceful disagreement, if that makes sense. If someone disagrees with me, I welcome it. I want to hear other people's thoughts on this. Um, and there is a way to disagree with people. There is a way to come across, and there is a way to discuss things without becoming heated and without calling names and, without being belligerent about it. So I welcome open discussion in my groups. There have been times where I have completely disagreed with something someone has said, and I just slide on by. I let it go because I don't want it to just be a group that expresses only what I believe. I want other thoughts of belief in there because as Christians, we have soul liberty. Okay. And as Christians, we're allowed to formulate our own thoughts and opinions. And I never want a group that only has one train of thought or only like thinks a certain way. Even within our own church, I love it that all the women here and all the families here are different. We're all different from each other. Like we all have different standards, we all have different convictions, but yet we have the same goal in place. The goal of reaching others for Christ, growing good, godly families, and helping to save the world, right? That's like the main goal here at Liberty Baptist Church. And so we have that unity in place, but then we're all different. We're like all different in the way we homeschool. We're all different in our own individual, unique standards that are in our homes. And no one feels the pressure to be just like my family, or I don't feel the pressure to be just like this family. We're all different in those areas. So that's what I strive to have differences while having unity at the same time, if that makes sense. So that's what I try to do in the group too. I strive for unity, but then having different trains of thought, different schools of thought when it comes to different things. So that's a group on Facebook. You can look it up and become a member there. There's almost 500 members, I think, there on Facebook. We have a lot of good discussions. This was just one of them that I really wanted to talk about because it's a very touchy subject, isn't it? And I'm sure I'll be under a lot of hate for having the opinions that I have or the beliefs that I do, but our life experiences shape our opinions and our beliefs. And we, what's the word? So our life experiences shapes our opinions and beliefs. And I've seen a lot being in the ministry, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I've seen a lot of different unique family situations, and I've seen how kids turn out in different family situations. And I've seen things that have worked, and I've seen things that haven't worked. And so, if I can share any of those things on here, I would be glad to do it. And I know eventually I might be saying, um, this didn't work for my family. So here's something that didn't work. But, because I don't have all the answers and I don't know everything, I am liking how my kids are turning out and they love me and I love them. And they're doing really good so far. So there's that. But it's Angel, Anglea. And he is on YouTube. He puts all his preaching on YouTube now, which I'm thrilled about. And he does have like I was listening to one sermon, it was really, really good about things I did as a parent. I can't remember, or things we did in the home. But his church is Faith Baptist Church of Bourbonnais. Um, and it's there on YouTube if you search it up, and all of his sermons should be online. And then there's some of Mrs. Angel speaking too, not as much as I would like. She does Sunday school, some lady Sunday school stuff there. I wish her one on marriage was on there. I might eventually reach out to her and see if she will come on here to talk about the marriage subject that she talked about at the ladies retreat, because it was so good and so helpful. So I'm going to see if possibly she would come on here. But any of his sermons on the home are exceptional. And he is one that has great fruit. I think they have, Amber, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they have 6 children. And every single one of their children are either in full-time ministry or just actively serving in their church. In fact, every single one of their kids might be missionaries, on staff at a church, evangelist wives, pastors' wives. I mean, every single one of them. And they just are filled with the joy of the Lord. Like they're just joyful and happy and just serving the Lord, raising their grandkids in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And I know, they are men at the end of the day. Pastor Angel is a man. Have there been offenses? Yeah, probably in the past. He's just a man at the end of the day. But he is a man who loves the Lord, and his wife is a woman who loves the Lord, and it shows. And their children love the Lord, and it shows. And their grandkids love the Lord, and it shows. And those are the type of people that I am drawn to, because not only do they have good doctrine as far as like King James and separation and all that. Are they on the same page as us as eschatology and all that? Absolutely not. That is the least of my concern, because you know what else they have good doctrine in? Doctrine is not only end times events. Doctrine is the way you live. And so often in the Bible, doctrine is related to behavior. And they have some of the best doctrine I have ever seen out of any Baptist because they are living the life, they are walking the walk, they are talking the talk, and they have produced great fruit in their ministry. I know that church was over reseeding Illinois. They've helped plant a lot of churches here in Illinois. Our church was one of them. So every church that they've helped plant in Illinois, they are reaping the benefits of seeing people come to Christ, homes change, lives changed. Um, you know, they are reaping the benefits of helping others. So um it's just doing a really good work. It's a soul winning church. You know, they have great doctrine as far as behavior goes. And those are the people that I'm really, really drawn to. And no, it's not the retreat you usually go to. It was actually at Kite River. I went there for the first time this year, but it was a super good retreat. So I'm hoping to get a group of you ladies to go with me next year. It was just an overnight one, which was kind of nice. So, and yeah, we are still going to go to the Central Baptist one in Illinois. So for any of my ladies listening, we are going to go to that one. I'm going to try. I think I just got the papers for it. So yeah. Anyways, and any of my listeners, if you ever like, if I speak of these things and you want to go, reach out to me and I'll totally get you hooked up as far as like registering dates, different things like that of when you want to go. If you're in the Illinois area and you want to try, most of the retreats we go to are in the Illinois area. So definitely reach out and I will get you set up to go with us. It would be really fun. So they're always a refreshing time of going and being around other ladies, other godly ladies who are seeking to serve the Lord. So that was my controversial GLS for the day. Give me your thoughts in the comments, even if it just, like I said, this is not an echo chamber. If you have a different school of thought, please let me know in the comments below. This is just very near and dear to my heart. Ladies, we need to be careful making anything into idols, especially making things into idols that are going to cause us to go against the clear things of the Bible. Let's keep the clear things of the Bible the most important things. Let's love our husbands. Let's listen and submit to our husbands. Let's love our children well. Let's rule our house as well. Let's govern our house as well. Let's have good doctrine when it comes to behavior. Let's do all those things listed in the Bible that it tells us to do. And let's stop getting caught up in this movement of listening to Carissa Collins influencer type people and deciding that we know how to run our family the best, even if our husband isn't on board. So this is super near and dear to my heart. And you're going to have a much happier marriage and a much happier life if you just keep things in the correct order that they are, if you keep priorities in the correct order that they are. And if you decide that you're not just going to profess that you're godly, you're actually going to live godly. And by living godly, you're actually going to do the things outlined in the Bible that are clear and that are the important things. So anyways, that is it. That is it. I will talk to you guys next week. Should be pretty regular here for the next couple months. So I hope you have a great week and I will see you guys next week.